let's see, record on the cloud. And then I gotta, how do I pause the recording on here? What did I do?
No, it's good. It's good. The focus was changed, but the sharing is still here. I see the Zoom room.
But I think pause record.
Lord.
And as I told say a bit about it, started off at professor of psych after at York University, really her first faculty position except for 1 year stint. And she's been at York ever since. She's a mainstay of York University, which is known to be an excellent, one of the best locations for vision science in North America. What I know Laurie for is her work in stereo binocular vision, but also for being one of the researchers in vision who has been very successful in translating what she's learned about the way the visual system functions and perceives depth in stereo into applied context. So Laurie has done quite a bit of work working with Christie, the projector company, and just working at stereoscopy in cinema. And then after that, she then established herself the only faculty member ever to go to Meta and do a sabbatical in their research division and help them work out issues with stereoscopy in AR, the space of AR VR. So pretty awesome you were able to do that. I also know Laurie as a former president of VSS, right? And so you know, this is a annual conference that attracts 3,000 about vision researchers from across the globe to come study science. That gives you, you know, just to further the cred, the incredible cred that Laurie has. So we're really lucky. Nice to you. All really lucky to have Laurie here today to talk. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. I invited Laurie originally COVID, and that was before then the Meta sabbatical. So I'm waiting. Very happy to work out.
Yeah, at one point we were talking about just doing it over Zoom during COVID, right? And I said, oh, can't we wait? I want to be able to come in person and meet everybody and see everything. And I'm so glad we did that because, man, going around today and seeing all the labs and the facilities and the people, the questions you're asking, I'm just really glad that I had the chance to do that. So I want to especially thank people for taking the time. I know that you've had lots of candidates coming through and lots of talks, and I know that can be a little tiring. So thanks for taking the time. Thanks for being here today. Yeah, and I did what I was supposed to do. Just a moment here, see if I can move my slides forward. I can't. Just a minute. Okay. Maybe if I do this. Okay, we're good. We're good. So I did, as I said, I did what I was supposed to do, and I prepared a first part of the talk, which is an overview about me, which I don't usually do. So that's the introduction, and then I'll talk about my research for a bit. And it's mainly about depth perception from stereopsis. And I'm going to hone in on one aspect, and that is the interaction between the experience of the users and depth conflicts. So the situations where you have conflicting depth information. And then I'll talk a little bit about patient considerations. So, me, as Gabe already very kindly introduced me, you probably don't even need any of this. I'm a professor in psychology. As I was telling the students and trainees at lunchtime today, I've been like all psychology all the way through, and a member of the Center for Vision Research, which has a very nice cluster of people that are studying vision science, different perspectives, different backgrounds. We've got just about everybody. We've got people in math also, and also in philosophy. many of them, if not most, are engaged in both basic science and in work with a more applied focus. And when I say applied focus, that could be clinical, it could be industrial collaborations, lots of different avenues. So I invite you all to come visit at some point. So I really have focused on two parallel streams throughout my career. And I've had basic fundamental research questions and my more applied work that Gabe mentioned. And so I've got this like first chunk of very low level, you call it spatial vision type work, trying to understand the mechanisms underlying stereopsis in humans. And a lot of that is focused on how we deal with really large disparity information. And then there's a cluster of work where I was looking at more like mid-level processing and the impacts of things like stereopsis on surface interpolation and how perceptual grouping or perceptual organization affects our ability to see depth from stereopsis. And I still love that stuff, and I like to go back to it. And recently, moving, I'll say in the last 10 years, towards understanding how stereopsis is used in natural contexts, more complex contexts. Now, all this stuff back here is very both low level and simple and done on displays where you're fixed in space and only a few things vary at a time. Whereas more recently, we've been using physical targets, comparing performance for these physical stimuli with what happens when you're trying to sort of bridge the real world in the lab and use VR and its associated issues. So various experiments comparing virtual environments, real environments under a variety of contexts. So that's kind of the fundamental part. And then this other stream really started with work that I did with IMAX when I first arrived at York University. And I told the grad students this morning about this and how we established that. It's kind of a good lesson in how to establish a collaboration. Just call them up and ask. And then after that, went on to do work in 3D film, looking at things like the effect of using high frame rate, 3D. One of the early laser projection setups that Christy was building, we helped them evaluate whether or not color breakup was going to be disturbing, that kind of thing. And then worked with Defense Research and Development Canada. And I should mention that this latter part with Christy and from there on was really in collaboration with Rob Allison, and he's a collaborator of mine at York University. So with the aviation project, we're looking at, well, do helicopter pilots use stereo when they're landing or when they're maintaining low hover? So that was fun. And another side project has been looking at image quality assessment. And this has been ongoing for probably about 12 years now with the Video Electronic Standards Association. And in this case, we're looking at the detectability of artifacts that result from image compression. And most recently, we've been doing that with 3D content, which is of most interest to us. And then Qualcomm's been a great supporter of our work. And Rob and I have been working hard on understanding the salience and causes of distortions in AR and VR, particularly distortions in depth that are result from things like optics and motion gain and interpupillary distance mismatch. And then, as Gabe mentioned, I spent some time at Meta working on trying to help them understand an artifact that occurs due to binocular vision in AR and VR. So that's me. And today I'm going to talk about stereopsis. I realize that this is not necessarily everybody's thing, so just interrupt me at any point if anything's not making sense. Yeah, if anything's not making sense, just stop me. So we know it's a binocular acute depth, and I think if you guys were here at Paul's talk yesterday, you probably went ahead and defined all this for me, probably better than I will. So stereo is quite special in many ways. Because we have two eyes laterally separated in our head, we get these different vantage points of any point in space we're looking around, and our brains are able to interpret this information to provide very, very precise information about the relative separation and depth between 2 points. So under ideal conditions, stereo is a hyperacuity. So, and it's not unusual for someone to be able to detect and identify the direction of a depth offset that's only a hair's width between 2 points from the distance of a meter. And you can do that based on stereopsis alone. So of course, this makes it really great for very fine detailed tasks like threading and needle. But it also gives you the amount of depth between 2 points. So this is, I'll refer to this as depth magnitude. So you can, from stereopsis alone, estimate the amount of depth that you see between 2 points. And this has received a little less experimental focus lately. It used to be a really popular topic in the early part of the century, but not so much anymore. And I think that's partly because it's a little bit harder to quantify, and but I think it's arguably more relevant to our interactions with the world around us, the real world, and also in VR air. So for instance, reaching out to grab a cup, navigating rough terrain, Gabe would know, or getting a candy. So in my lab, we've studied a lot of different attributes of our ability, the things that affect our ability to get depth information from, or this depth magnitude information from stereopsis, these low-level properties, mid-level factors. Also, that availability and consistency with other depth information in a scene, and our experience with the viewing environment. And these are the two that I'm going to talk about today, this kind of interaction between experience and the cue conflicts as well. And to do that, I'm going to walk through 3 studies. And one of them, the first one, some of you might have heard me talk about before. It's one that my student Brittany Hartle did in 2016, I think, where we were using really simple bar stimuli presented on a stereoscope. And then more recently, we've been using these naturalistic branches and presenting them in VR. And then finally, I'll talk about a study which isn't the depth magnitude experiment, but has people just matching the perceived location of depth. And this one is in an augmented reality set. So we got it increasingly complex, but not increasingly better. Okay, so let me tell you about this first study. And again, stop me if you need clarification. Again, a really simple stimulus arrangement. We have a pair of lines on a screen. And initially, our interest was kind of very, very straightforward. We were trying to compare different assessment methods. You could use a within vision modality where you're just adjusting the width of a horizontal line to match how much depth you're seeing between those 2 bars. And people are actually really good at that. Find it very easy. Or a cross modality task like these other 2, where you're just kind of indicating how much depth you see. And in the first one, we just have them do it loosely on a tabletop or use a purpose-built sensor strip. Very, very straightforward. But we included 2 groups of observers, and this is the part that I'm going to focus on, we had inexperienced and experienced observers. By experienced in this context, I mean, these are people that have done lots of different experiments in the lab. They've participated in experiments using the stereoscope. They're experienced with stereoscopic displays, whereas the inexperienced people are undergrads, naive undergrads who haven't been in experiments like this before. But they're all tested for stereoacuity, have no deficits in their ability to see depth from stereopsis. Okay, so I told you this already. On the left here, we have an example of a stereoscope where we have two displays. The observer sits in between and the mirrors. There's a beam splitter there that presents two views to each eye. Okay. Observers indicated how much depth they see between the lines, and we varied the amount of depth randomly. Let's get to the point. Here are the results that we obtained with our experienced observers. In these plots, I'm going to show you the estimated depth along the vertical axis as a function of the predicted amount of depth they should see. And this is perfect performance. And then I'll show you each of the sets of results in turn for the different measurement techniques. So this is the haptic sensor strip, the digital caliper, and they're just putting on the table, and then the virtual. So what you can see is, first off, there's no difference depending upon the measurement method. These guys are identical. Oops. And our experienced observers are performing really well. They can do this. There's not a lot of variability. They're doing well. Okay, what about our inexperienced observers? Same kind of graph. Here's the haptic sensor, digital caliper, and the virtual ruler. And initially, this was really shocking. And we've got something like 15 observers here. And you can see that they've got substantial overestimate at one end and huge underestimates. It's almost like they're not scaling the amount of depth they're seeing with the changes in the separation and stimulate. It's a big effect. You don't usually get such nice big effects, but it was puzzling. So I'm just showing here the average. You can forget about the assessment method, right? These are the average results for our experienced and our inexperienced observers. Okay, so what was going on? What we were wondering was if these inexperienced observers were more sensitive to the Q conflicts that exist between stereopsis and monocular cues to depth in the stereoscope. And initially I thought that this was almost silly. I think I might even have said it because there's so little conflict that it seemed strange that that would have this kind of effect on the observers. But you know, they presented these sticks, these lines on these displays. We don't change the size of the line as it gets closer or further away. So size is in conflict. Perspective doesn't change. It doesn't get taller or shorter or longer as it moves in depth. And you know, you make little head movements when your head's in the chin rest, but it's fixed. So, okay, these are the things, some of the things anyway. So to check this, we replicated this study under perfectly consistent Q conditions. And to do that, we used physical stimuli. And with great overkill, we used our motion stage setup where we've got these, it's a fully computerized motion stage where we've got a pair of stages on the bottom, X, Y, or Z, X, and also on the top, and then we hung the stimuli down in between. So we basically reproduced our two sticks, windowed it down, so the observer sitting here just saw two sticks moving in depth. We made it as similar as possible to the view that they had in the stereoscope. So the idea being that now our novice observers should perform really well if that was the cause, if it was because of acute conflict. Okay, so let's look at, okay, I should say it's the same group of experienced observers, but our novice observers are a brand new group, so there's no practice effects here. No magic. No sleight of hand. So you can see the experienced observers in purple and the naive observers in green. And they're indistinguishable, statistically identical. So this was, yeah, again, really surprising, but maybe it shouldn't have been. Using these virtual stimuli, if the inexperienced observers are making really large systematic errors. Our experienced observers don't. But in the physical case, we have all of the depth information consistent from all of the cues. Even though, yeah, I wanted to point this out. This is what it looked like. So it's not like we've kind of thrown in a whole bunch of information here. But I should point out that it's not just the monocular depth cues. I have to also say that in this physical environment, the individuals doing the task have a much better sense of how far away the targets are from them, right? And there are a bunch of sources of the absolute distance information that can help them scale. So it's probably a combination of all those things. But the main point being that these seemingly small conflicts seem to have a really big impact on people that are not experienced with 3D display systems. Even stereoscopes, which are really simple. Yes, Gabe?
A quick question, now a good time?
Oh, yes, yes.
So, I mean, they're experienced observers, it's just, they're not experienced participants. And so.
Well, that's my other take home. I took it away. So the inexperienced observers are experienced, they're experts with the real world. Yes.
So what's your gut instinct here? Do you think that they're inexperienced at VR or inexperienced at the type of task you're giving them, like psychophysical task? Or your experienced observers, all psychophysicists that you're vision scientists that do?
Yes.
How to describe it?
That's a really good point. So, and I have other data that speak to that, but I think within this study, we can just go here, because that's also a group of naive observers who've not had any experience with the psychophysical task, right? So I think in this case, it's not the experience with psychophysics. It's actually the availability and the use of the depth information. Yeah.
Thanks for it.
What's the role of accommodation for these young people or older people?
Yeah. That's another great question. These are my plants. No, I actually don't think accommodation's doing much here because, so first of all, they are young people. So they could, if the stimuli were placed much closer and the depth offsets were much larger, accommodative blur could have been quite useful. As it is, the stimuli were, I think these were placed at like 50 centimeters and the distances are quite small. So it's possible that they could change their accommodation around or their, fixation around and get some blur change, but I don't think it would contribute a lot.
That's a near task.
Yeah.
Where stereopsis is very important.
Yeah.
But of course.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. So accommodation. So the way I think of it, the accommodative part for this is that they could easily see how far away it was. They could accommodate to that plane, but accommodation wasn't helping them like make the judgment. But then you get having the added distance information helps you scale the depth. Well, you need it to scale disparity. So, yeah. Okay. Yes, Andy. Why would I do that? I know. Yeah, we could have done that. So to be, not to be funny, but to answer your question seriously. we used this apparatus because we could whip through it. We could whip through the experiment really quickly. And because everything was computerized, we also had our sensor strip hooked up and we could do automated readings. So it was easier. The Howard Goldman requires moving things around manually. Fair. Okay, let's move ahead here. Okay, second experiment. This one, again, we're doing depth estimation with, I'll call it natural, we'll say more natural or naturalistic stimuli. These, we're calling them branches and thickets. And in this case, if you recall on that first slide, we had the three methods. In this case, we had the stimuli shown and then people just adjusted they used a control pad to adjust the width of a line to match how much depth. And now we're using a Quest 2 headset, so it's presented in VR. If you can pre-fuse, you'll see this as a stereoscopic rendering. If you look at the center line, there's a little fixation spot, and then the branches on either side are displaced in depth relative to it. So that's what the branch looked like. And this is what the thickets look like. So the aim of this study also is different from what I'm talking about today. The aim of this study initially is to understand the effects of diplopia on perceived depth magnitude in simple and complex stimuli. So that hence the branches and the thickets. But I just want to flag that we used a really large range of disparities here. So that affects the data. So I'll point that out. Anyway, so we're just measuring how much depth do you see in these between the two far branches or the thickets. Then we have naive or inexperienced and experienced observers. So here's data from our experienced observers. I think we had 12 observers here. Then what you see is that we have pretty decent depth scaling for both the lines and the thickets. So that's the thickets are in purple, the lines are in blue. You can see that we have scaling up to a point and then some flattening. Okay, I just want to highlight to you that we also measured where things go diplopic or double, so they can't fuse them anymore. And that happens about here. And this is kind of what we expected. So up to this point, we see the scaling, there's overestimation. We're not sure if that's because of looking at a larger range of depths in general, or because it's on the headset, but we'll leave that for now. What about our inexperienced observers? That's what they did. This was really shocking. So we're looking at changes in depth between these branches from 2 centimeters to 12 centimeters. And people are just picking 4 centimeters and going with it. Like it was really shocking. So we were trying to assess diplopia and compare it to depth magnitude estimation, and we had to stop with our naive observers because we couldn't get enough of them who could even complete the task. But just to show you that the data is flat, this is the individual data. We only had one person who showed any real scaling, but even that's really weak. Okay. So in this case, we have our experienced observers performing reasonably well with overestimates up to the diplopia. But we see these deficits in our novice observers, and in this case, quite substantial. And this is weird because in the headset, there are consistent depth cues. We actually rendered these things properly so that when you had depth offset, the size changed. We had, let's see what else, we had perspective. We had all this information that was not present in our sticks on the stereoscope for our lines. But we have other conflicts. Now, in this case, in the headset, we have to deal with the fact that, okay, and I think the Quest 2 has a focal plane of around 2 meters. So that means your accommodations out there, and we're presenting these things in centimeters. So you have this accommodation divergence conflict. People will look at the stimulus to do the task. I didn't think it would have that big of an effect. To be honest, I didn't even fully believe in divergence accommodation conflict being a problem until I saw this. Yeah. Also, there's uncertainty in the headset about how far away things are. We know people underestimate space in VR. And in general, there is a sense of uncertainty and noise around distance estimation, so that affects scaling. But for our novice observers, it's like it wiped out their scaling entirely, which is really strange. Any questions about this? Yes.
Sure. So, did you retest with old observers that don't have vertical accommodation conflict?
No, we didn't. So this is relatively new. My PhD student just did this in the fall, like just before the fall vision meeting. And when I do it, I'm fine, but I'm experienced, right? So what we need is a group of inexperienced old people.
Naive.
Although I'm trying to avoid the word naive because it implies they're, well, naive. Yes. Yes.
I mean, when I see data like that, it makes.
I know, eh?
So you have did you have any pretest or anything? To make sure they could at least do the most basic, this is in
Yep.
front of this.
Yep. Yeah, they were definitely doing the task. We with another group of inexperienced observers, we had them do the task monocularly, right? And then they don't say it's 4 centimeters at constant, they give none, right? So they know the difference between some and none. And we actually asked them to we took physical sticks as a starting point and said, okay, here's the target, how much depth do you see? And they're doing it. And it does seem really strange, right? 12 centimeters, it's 2 centimeters. So we're still trying to understand this, but that's our best guess for now. Yes, they don't seem to be able to disregard this. So, okay. Let's go to part 3. So now we're not doing depth magnitude anymore. Now we're looking at depth matching, which is like the easiest thing you can do in a stereo land, right? You say, here's a thing in depth, just align this other thing with it. Now, in our case, because we're trying to avoid people actually just matching the disparity, we show the target and then we say, align this in a probe to match the remembered location of the target. So that's what we're doing here. Distance matching. But what we were interested in is the effects of conflicting occlusion and binocular disparity. So there's a reason for this. It's a very applied reason to do with AR rendering, which some of you would be familiar with, but leaving that aside for now. Match the probe to the remembered perceived location of a virtual letter viewed through with a HoloLens. This is what it kind of looked like. We had it masked out so people couldn't see all the edges of things, but we've got a pattern in the distance, just horizontal lines. So there's something that you can see in the background. And then we have this sheet of LCD, liquid crystal stuff that we could change the opacity of with electric current. So we could vary it from being opaque, so we have maximum occlusion, to transparent. And what we did was we had the observer sitting, as you saw Dominic on the last slide, with the HoloLens on. And we had a letter overlaid on the surface. So the letter would appear, go away, and then they would just have to align the probe to where they thought the letter was. We did this for our 3 levels of opacity, assuming that once we got to this level, the transparent condition, we wouldn't have any problem. We also measured a baseline without any surface at all. Letter comes out. Okay, we tested conditions where the letter's in front of the surface, no conflict, and behind the surface. Of course, behind the surface it's not occluded, right? There's the conflict. The letter is there. It's just the disparity is specifying a distance further away than the surface, but it's not being occluded by the surface. Can't really show you what it looks like without the headset. Okay, so I'm showing you now the matched distance on the vertical axis and the target distance. These are in meters now. The data that you can see here is for our 4 conditions. Teal is no surface at all. The opaque condition is brick colored and then going through to transparent pale pink. So the surface position is shown by this vertical bar, and you can see that people do this really well. No problem. Oh, and I should say, these are a mixture of experienced and inexperienced observers. No problem. This study is, and I'll talk about this in a sec. When we move the letter behind the occluding surface, which isn't really an occluding surface, but as the disparity signals a further and further distance, what we see is, okay, first of all, when no surface is present, there's no problem up until the very last furthest distance. We see a slight drop. But in the opaque condition, the darker one here, you can see that there's this fall off. You get an increasing underestimate in the perceived location or the remembered perceived location of the target. And that's big. That's like 10 centimeters. And we get the exact same thing for the semi-transparent surface. And you can see that even the transparent surface has this impact. So even though the evidence for the surface being there is really weak, when you're looking at this, all you can really see is the edge of that transparency, the transparent film thing. But it still reduces performance. It causes underestimates of around 5 centimeters. Yeah. And this happens consistently across levels of experience. We thought, okay, well, this was initially done kind of in not far space, but at 1.2 meters. And both the target and the probe are virtual. Is the disruption due somehow to those aspects of the task? So we replicated it we actually did this just last week. So this is new data and it's not complete yet, but we're just doing a reach task. So we set it up in close and near space. People just were asked to point to where the letter had appeared. Did it in front of and behind a physical occluding surface. We didn't vary the transparency in this case. In front and behind and absent. Here are our data at the reach space. So again, I've got this n equals 7 to remind myself we've only got half the data. We've got a slight overestimate. You can see a consistent overestimate when there's no surface present at all. That's the teal condition. That's, I think, largely driven by one person. We'll see. I think that'll be gone. And then in the surface present condition, you can see that people are performing great. Okay. And then we find the exact same kind of pattern. You can see the errors are larger. We've got fewer observers, but we're again seeing quite large errors caused by the occlusion and disparity conflict were around 5 to 7 centimeters. In this case, for something that's very close. So this phenomena is not due to how we're measuring it or the fact that it's far away or close. We're seeing it consistently. And we're seeing it, we have a couple of people that have done this over and over and over again because they're in the lab. Feel they have to. And it just doesn't go away. So just to summarize this, people perform well when the depth cues are all consistent. So that's a kind of recurring theme here. You have everything consistent, will do very well. But they're not able to disregard the conflict between occlusion and binocular disparity. Wow, okay. Reducing that opacity of the surface in the first part of the study that I told you about improved the matching accuracy, but we still saw biases even when the occluding surface was transparent. And they occur over a large range of distances and tasks. Okay. Any questions? I'm going to do a sum up. Is there any questions with this experiment in particular? You just carry on. So-called novice, naive observers are experts with the real world. That's I think one of the main take homes. And we see significant failures in depth estimation and the amount of perceived depth in 3D displays that result from Q conflicts, way more than I would have anticipated. Adding consistent cues helps in some cases, but not for everybody. And things like the divergence accommodation conflict, I have to acknowledge, seem to have a big impact. Some depth cue conflicts are just intrinsically disruptive. And this does make sense. We never see this happen in the real world. So our brains are just not going to accept it. And yeah, experience doesn't weaken that effect. And I want to point out that that's different from what happens with divergence accommodation conflicts, because we know that you can learn to disregard that conflict. So that's the basis for learning how to free fuse, right? You free fuse, you keep your accommodation on the plane of the image, and you change your divergence. People can do that. But this conflict they can't do. Can't overcome. So here is my considerations part. I think this is a cautionary tale for our effective use of stereopsis in 3D displays and for studying how we see depth in the real world. For people like me that want to do both things, it impacts both sides. So behavioral scientists have to consider this in their research design and interpretation. AR, VR, XR, whatever you want to call it, have to be aware that some Q conflicts are going to be disastrous. You got to watch out for them. Thank my collaborators, especially Brittany and Dominic and Arlene, who are all grad students in my lab. Oh, Brittany's a postdoc now. And Rob Allison, who's a longtime collaborator. And I want to thank you for your time. Thank you.
Much, Laurie. Way to keep time. Excellent.
Am I right on time? Yay.
So,
Yes, Paul.
So, just you allowed to say the inspiration.
Sorry.
Inspiration.
Oh, yeah, it's not, yeah, I can say it. So it's a well-known phenomena in augmented reality that if you can't do real-time rendering, you end up with these occlusion conflicts. It's a very applied problem, right? And so until you can do real-time rendering all the time, you're gonna run into this. Did that make sense to you guys? Anyway, these things happen and it looks so weird. So that's what drove the question. Yes. Yeah, I think the main thing is that my opinion is that it's going to take several approaches. So to any one question, you may need to do it on a stereoscope. So you've got the spatial resolution. You may need to do it in real world contexts if you can. But you can't vary everything or manipulate everything the way you want to. And then you may need to do it with a headset or with head tracking or something so that you can actually have, your own movement as well. So it feels like you need to fully understand these problems. You need to approach it in multiple ways, which is a lot to ask, I know. Yeah, I think we have somebody back here.
I have a question. It's not related to the material you presented today, but your material inspired this question.
Okay.
And it's maybe more for the whole vision research community in general. But as I was watching this, I was thinking about, have there been studies on the depth perception of really high-performing athletes, basketball stars or tennis players, people who have very high performance and hand-eye coordination? And I'm just curious if they've done those studies and if their results are very different than just kind of the average population.
So I think there have been a couple of studies. I'm blocking who it was. There was somebody, I think it might have been Dennis Levi, did a study with people who sew, tailors, and found that they had better stereoacuity. I've done experiments. I did when I was working with the 3D film industry, we had access to people that were doing post-production stuff on 3D content all day, every day. And we did this experiment where we tested this group of 3D content manipulators and people in our lab, expert stereo viewer people, and then naive folks, and a group of psychophysicists who hadn't done the 3D testing or the stereoscopic testing. Long story short, we found no differences in any of the groups except that our stereo experts had lower stereoacuity thresholds. So I'm not sure. I think that improvements are very task specific. So I'm not sure.
I'm going to say that you just inspired me. Unfortunately, David Mann is out in England and Leeds, but he's a VSSer, a vision science nerd, and he's on the committee that makes decisions, sets the thresholds for who's allowed to enter the Special Olympics because of sensory differences, right? Huh. So how blind you have to be to engage in the sports.
Wow.
Special Olympics for blind, right? They have to set these standards. So it's not quite the question you asked, but it's quite interesting. So yeah, maybe it might be difficult to get them to fly out here, but maybe we can get them to give a Zoom seminar and speak to this sort of thing. It's a really interesting question.
Well, I'm just struck by the sample size, 7 and 12. Infinitesimally small compared to the human population.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
A lot more variability on that.
Yeah.
But the error bar is on the Lord also so small, right?
Yeah.
Psychophysics, sometimes you get away with that because you got enough statistical power to.
Yeah, we do a lot of testing and. Sorry, the standard error of the mean? No. Oh, sorry, I didn't know who was asking. Yeah, it's standard error of the mean typically. Yeah. And then we have other studies where we've tested, well, large numbers like 25. But Yeah, no, we always look at the, the raw data. That's why I showed you the flat graphs, the individual graphs, because if you average across people, some of whom are doing one thing and some are doing another, that's misleading. But no, I take your point. But as Gabe says, we test the heck out of them so that we up our power. Oh, at the back.
Very capable of testing one concept. So when you define the error bars, do you do them by repetition of the same experiment with the same person?
So the standard error of the mean, how we calculate it is within a study, we'll have several repetitions of the same condition. We average that. So we have a score for that person, right? That's their score. And then we have that for each of our individuals in the experiment. The standard error of the mean is the variance, the calculation based on that group, not on their individual scores. Is that
But you still have multiple runs from the same person.
always, because that's the only way that you can do psychophysics properly, yeah.
This, the technical deal here is correlated. And if you run statistical tests, you need to have uncorrelated. Because if you expose the same person to the same experiment multiple times, there's gonna be a learning curve.
No, it's not correlated data because we're averaging within a condition and the conditions are all randomly interleaved. So there's not, I'm not sure I'm taking your point.
Within an individual, between individuals, counterbalance the presentation order and stimuli to try it. So if there is no critique and balance that one person got certain stimuli early in the trial and another person got same stimuli late experiment.
Yeah, we have to carefully control for that. Yeah.
Same environment in general, same stimuli, but you still have the same environment. So it's not truly the same.
Yeah, but then it would be impossible, I think.
Yes, I'm just saying in that case, because we use a different statistical tools that take into account this potential correlation.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, maybe we should take that. Yeah. Yeah, Paul has a point as well, or a question.
I think it should be the last question, then we can move out to copy.
Okay.
So if people are unexperienced, how do they become experienced?
Yeah, I've tried doing the Westheimer thing where I train somebody and track them over time, and I've never had the stamina to stay with it till they get to we're doing it right now with somebody doing the magnitude estimation, but it takes a lot of trials. It takes and motivation. I think there's something, I think it's a complex thing. Yeah.
Laurie, that was a really wonderful talk, and thank you so much for
Very
coming
welcome.
to visit us. It's been great to have you, and as is tradition, Laurie will meet whoever wants to get the chance to ask her questions out in the lobby or copy so people hang out there for a few minutes. So thank you so much, Laurie.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Hey.
That was great. So I